All right. Hi all, Dave Javid with Plan to Place. I'm part of the Ramey Associates consultant team working on the general plan update for South San Francisco. And we're here tonight through a series of meetings that we've been holding on what we're calling policy frameworks for what's going to evolve into different elements of the general plan. And tonight we're here to discuss land use, which is a major topic, and we'll get into the specifics about what we're going to talk about here tonight. But before we do that, as we typically do, we do have live Spanish interpretation available, and I'm going to ask Jasmine to read this, and we'll get that room open.
Para los que quieren interpretación en español, miren en la parte de abajo de su pantalla y van a ver el globo donde pueden encontrar interpretación en simultáneo en español. So vaya a More, si es por teléfono, busquen el globo, busquen interpretación y escojan por favor el español, si quieren oír la junta en español. Gracias.
Thank you, Jasmine. And with that, that room is now open for those that want to access the Spanish interpretation. We can go on to the next slide. So tonight's agenda, as I mentioned earlier, is really initially to give you a brief overview about the project, kind of where we've been, where we're headed, and then really dive in a little bit deeper about this one policy framework around land use. Throughout the meeting, we're going to do live polling because we really like to give you all an opportunity to provide input and make it a little more interactive and fun. So you'll see polls pop up throughout the meeting, initially starting with demographics just to get a sense of who's in the room with us, but then also asking you some specifics that will allow us to have a greater discussion when we get to that point. Typically, we like to have small group discussion where we'll break up into smaller groups and have a discussion around the facilitated topics. In this case, depending on how many folks join us, we might end up all staying together. We'll kind of make that call as we get toward the end of the meeting. And then depending on those small groups, we'll have a report back if we do have small groups and kind of share back what we heard and then talk about next steps and a great series of meetings and that are coming up and the process moving forward from here. So with that, if we want to go to the next slide. So as I mentioned before, these community conversations really are building off of all the great engagement that we've done with you all to date, and we'll get into a little bit about what that looked like. But it's really kind of what we've learned that's now turning into these technical analyses that again kind of provides us a baseline for where the general plan elements are going to evolve. And we're really going to want to kind of get your feedback tonight on outcomes, on goals, and on policy measures that we are putting forth. And I'll mention that in a second as well, but this is one of many opportunities to provide that input. We also have online feedback forms and surveys that we'd love for you all to go to and share with your neighbors to provide additional feedback. But tonight's meeting is really meant to give you that baseline understanding of this policy framework and then collect your input from there. So with that, if we go on to the next slide, there is an opportunity throughout the meeting to provide chat comments to us. We are kind of going to hold the discussion towards the end of the meeting, but if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, definitely feel free to use chat. And that's at the bottom of your participant window. You should see a little chat. If you click that, that'll give you the opportunity to provide input there. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be doing live polls throughout as well at menti.com, and we'll get into that here shortly. And then I already mentioned this as well, but all of this information is going to be up on the website where you can provide us additional input through interactive surveys. And that's all going to be at www.shapessf.com. And we highly encourage you all to go there after the meeting to provide additional input, both on this meeting, meetings that we've already had, and meetings moving forward, and the different topics that we're going to cover there. So just want to put that out there for you all as well. So if we go on to the next slide, I believe we're going to start our first Menti poll. So what I would like to ask you all to do is the easiest would be on your mobile device. If you want to pull up menti.com, so that's www.menti.com, and or you could pull it up on your computer screen. on a separate screen so you can access it there. And then once you're there, if you can please add this code, which is 79856931. Again, that's 79856931. Paul just entered that code for you as well into the chat window if you want to check it out there. And that code and the website will be available as we move through the survey. And just as a reminder, so when you get to that survey platform, you can go back and answer any of these questions at any time. So no anxiety about getting the answers in right away. And it's really just meant to be a very quick interactive way to engage with you all. So even if you don't go to the website and enter, that's okay too. But I hope that you all are able to join along with us. I think this is kind of a fun part to keep this as interactive as possible. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Megan to launch our first poll.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I am going to share a browser window. And if you've already logged into Mentimeter, you'd notice that the first question is sort of just a warm-up fun question. So we're all at home. What are you wearing right now? Shoes, slippers, flip-flops, you're just wearing socks. Some of you might be barefoot. Don't worry, this won't shape the general plan at all, but we just want to get you comfortable with the platform. So it looks like, how many participants do we have here? We have 11 people. Great. And now we have some demographic questions. This helps us keep track of, how many people are attending a workshop, who are attending these policy workshops, and it helps us, keep track of involvement and also target future engagement to different groups in the community. So it looks like most people have responded are between the ages of 31 and 64. Thank you. Next, race, ethnicity. And again, as Dave said, if you want to get to this later, or if you want to wait a moment, you can always log in here and answer these questions later on in this workshop. Which neighborhood do you live in? Downtown, Sunshine Gardens. A handful of people don't live in SSF. It's in Sarah's, 3 people. Person doesn't live in SSF. Okay. Neighborhood you work in? Downtown, East 101, East and Sarah. Don't work in SSF, Sunshine Gardens. So all of them up here. And next, we're curious to know if how many of you have attended a Shape SSF event before. This can include these policy workshops, community workshops in person held prior to COVID, can include online surveys, all sorts of things. But it looks like most of you have participated before, so that's great. Okay. Well, thank you. That's the last of the questions for now. We'll do a few more polling questions later on, but I'll turn it back over to Eric, I believe, or Dave.
Yeah, that's right. Eric is now going to take us through an overview of the process to date. So over to Eric.
Thanks, everyone, and good evening. Glad to see so many of you all are back this evening for our next Shape SSF policy conversation.
Sorry,
my name
Eric.
is Eric.
I think you might need to adjust the screen real quick to bring up the. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's okay. I think I perfect my screen sharing abilities 1 year into the pandemic, and I learn each time that I haven't done it yet. All right, how's that?
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you. So my name is Eric Derkovich. I'm a principal at Ramey & Associates. We have been working with you all in the community since early in 2019 on the general plan update process. For the next few minutes, I'm going to to really describe that general plan update process, what it addresses, and some of our initial engagement work that we've done since 2019. But first, I'll start with what is a general plan. So as many of you know, the general plan is really the long-range policy document for the city. Every city and county in the state of California is required to have and regularly maintain their general plan. The plan itself sets forth a 20-year vision for the future while really building on community assets and strengths and really tackling new and emerging challenges, both now and into the future that we see. And the general plan really helps to guide both policy development within the document, but also future policy development and then future development projects within the community. This graphic really shows the simplified process for the general plan update. We really kicked off our work with a discovery phase where we reviewed existing conditions in the community and then published a series of reports around mobility, land use, climate change, and other issues in the community. We then really worked with the community and community advisory committee to understand what you love about South San Francisco, what you'd like to see change in the city. And this listening really helped us to draft the vision, core values, and guiding principles, which I'll talk about in a few moments. And then we moved into a phase of the project where we developed a preferred land use plan and land use and mobility. We had a series of land use and mobility alternatives. And in the end was a preferred land use plan, which is really part and helped us kick off the next phases of our work around policy development, the environmental impact report, as well as the zoning code. And we're now really in this process where we're developing policy ideas to support the different elements of the general plan. During this process, we've done a significant number of community engagement activities, and this just includes a kind of a quick snapshot of some of that engagement. This includes a number of in-person activities like the visioning workshop and sub-area meetings that we did in the in-person time, so pre-COVID-19 pandemic. And then during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've really pivoted to more online and virtual engagement. These include virtual alternatives workshops, online surveys, and more. And we've heard a lot of ideas during this engagement process, and it really helped us to understand some of the key issues and some of the areas for policy development. This graphic illustrates just a few of those policy and programmatic ideas that were raised during those land use and mobility alternatives phase of the process. And this information has been really directly integrated into the policy frameworks that we are reviewing with you over the next several weeks. And now these community conversations are really an interim step in helping us develop what we call the chapters, or what are called the elements of the general plan itself. And so during this community conversations, we've developed these draft policy frameworks. They actually sit online, Shape SSF.net website. You can go and read them all. And these are really intended to be kind of 50 to 75% drafts to really kind of articulate some of the key goals and policies and implementation actions that we've heard or that we've been thinking about with city staff that would be part of the general plan update. And what we wanted to do in this kind of interim step is give everyone an opportunity to provide their input on those policies and actions before an entire general plan is written. So general plans are 300 pages long, and they're really complicated to get to. So we're going to have this interim step for you all to review. And as I mentioned earlier, an initial step in the general plan process was really to work with you all to develop a vision and a set of guiding principles for the general plan. And as you think about the policy framework today, I'd like you to consider whether it's working towards this vision and set of values and principles in the plan. The community vision provides an umbrella for the general plan. It articulates where we want to be in 2045. So South San Francisco is a place where everyone can thrive. It's high quality of life, diverse and inclusive community, livable neighborhoods and excellent services, culture of innovation, and environmental leadership ensure all people have an equitable opportunity to reach their full potential. Throughout the engagement process, we heard from community members a series of kind of shared values or shared beliefs. These include innovation, sustainability, equity and inclusion, and livability. And while the vision tells us where we want to be in the future, and the policies and actions tell us what we are going to do in the future, the community values really help describe how we are going to do those activities. We're going to do them with a lens of sustainability, a lens of equity. And finally, the guiding principles, these are the guiding principles up on the screen now, and they help define some of the key outcomes in the community. These include affordable, safe neighborhoods, high quality services, a safe and convenient transportation network, a resilient community, and a vibrant downtown and prosperous economy. Now, before I get into the land use policy framework, I'm going to do 5 minutes of land use primer and just start with what is land use. So land use really describes the human use and the activities that happen on each parcel of land within the city. Now, there are literally dozens of these different activities that happen across South San Francisco. And what we do as planners is we take all those different activities that happen on the land, and then we start to organize them and group them by type. So we can see on the left-hand side, we have different kinds of residential uses, from single family to a kind of an attached townhome, all the way to multifamily housing. We have a series of retail, service, and hospitality uses in the city. In South San Francisco, you have office, R&D, life sciences, and industrial uses. And then you also have on the right-hand side, different types of community uses. So these are public and institutional uses. So city properties, churches, schools, and parks and open space. So these really articulate and show the range of different land uses and land use activities within the city. And we take these kind of classifications and then we start to then organize them on the map. So, and we map them out across the city. And this shows the distribution of existing land uses within the community. So in your yellows and oranges to browns, you have those residential uses. And you can see most of those are all of those are west of Highway 101 and largely north of Colma Creek in Lindenville. And then you have those commercial uses, and those are mostly focused in places like the El Camino corridor, in Lindenville, in the east of 101 area. And then you have a series of kind of commercial uses, right? So retail uses, you can see those as a strip along places like Grand Avenue. And so this graphic really shows the proportion of those land uses by type within the city. So on the left-hand side, you see those are 100 squares. It's a 10 by 10 grid. Each square represents 1% of the land area in South San Francisco. So as you can see, about 2/5 or 40% of the city's land area is made up of residential uses. About the same percentage, about 40% of the land area is made up by commercial uses. Those are the things like retail and services, office and industrial uses. And then about a fifth of the city, so about 20% of the land area is devoted to things like public and institutional uses like churches, city-owned facilities and schools, as well as parks and open space. Now, general plan land uses are a little bit different than existing land uses. So the general plan land use map establishes the policy direction for each parcel in the city. And this map really focuses on the future vision and not necessarily what's on the ground now within the community. By state law, what's required in a general plan is that the map show the proposed land use in the future and what its allowable density or intensity is into the horizon of the general plan. Other elements of the general plan ensure that there's adequate infrastructure and services to really support that future land use. Now, as I mentioned, we went through a fairly extensive process to look at and evaluate land use alternatives for the city over last summer. And we hosted a series of virtual meetings. I think we did 8 of them over the summer and then a couple more in the fall with the preferred land use plan based on the community feedback that we received. This on your screen now is that preferred land use plan that we worked with over the summer, with you all over the summer to create. And during the conversation around land use, we heard a lot about a lot of big ideas. We heard about maintaining industrial in east of 101 and in Lindenville, of maintaining a diversity of small businesses, including commercial businesses in El Camino and the downtown area. But we also heard about the desire to kind of maintain the city as a world-class hub of life sciences while thinking about expansion into things like technology businesses. But we also heard a lot about the desire to add housing across the city of South San Francisco, while also creating new and vibrant residential neighborhoods in the east of 101 area and in Lindenville. And really the idea was to provide a variety of housing types for different income levels and households across the city. And these concepts were really integrated into this preferred land use map on the screen. And we're not going to be discussing the specific details of this map today, but rather the underlying policies that support this land use vision into the future. And so this engagement that we did over the summer, as well as that technical analysis back at the beginning of the project, has really helped lay the foundation for this land use policy framework, which I'm going to talk about next. This slide illustrates the basic structure of the general plan policy framework that I'm going to present over the next few slides to you. It includes key outcomes describing where we want to be in 2040. And then underneath that, kind of the goals, policies, and implementation actions or measures as to how we achieve those particular outcomes. Now, this general plan has a strong focus on tracking and measuring performance. And so we've also started to identify a series of metrics to track performance in the land use element, as well as targets to measure that performance over time. So this is a lot of text, so I'm going to kind of go through this a little bit slowly. But this on the screen are those sort of 5 desired outcomes that really build on that conversation we had last summer on the land use alternatives. So the first is to maintain a strong local economy that offers a diversity of employment opportunities for current and future residents and enhances the fiscal sustainability of the city. The second is a diverse supply of housing types affordable to different income levels and household compositions that promote a high quality of life for all residents. The third is an attractive community with a public realm that fosters activity and social interaction and celebrates South San Francisco's history and culture. The fourth is residents, employees, and visitors enjoy quality amenities and have convenient access to services, jobs, public facilities, and transportation infrastructure throughout the city. And then finally, the last one is a built environment that is sustainable and promotes equity and positive health outcomes. So that's a lot, and I read it all to you because it is quite a lot of text to get through. But we're going to come back to this outcomes, and we're going to ask you very specifically about your thoughts on these outcomes later on in our small breakout rooms. So as I mentioned, one of the unique things about these policy frameworks is the focus on tracking progress over time to make sure that the ideas that we're proposing in this general plan, that are embedded in this general plan, there's a way to monitor and track performance over time. So these are an initial set of performance metrics for the land use element. Now, there can be literally hundreds of different things that we track over time, but we want to focus down on what are the most important metrics that we think about. What are the most important data points that we track over time to make sure that we're achieving the outcomes that we want to in this general plan. So these revolve around a jobs housing ratio of about 2.6, maintaining a stable industrial building supply in the city, meeting the regional housing needs targets for housing units at all income levels, focusing and increasing the number of housing units near transit, and then ensuring that all residences and all homes are within a walkable 20-minute neighborhood. So now I'm going to go through for about the next 10 minutes, just a series of those goals with a series of kind of goals at the top in the blue or orange, and then underneath them, a series of kind of policy ideas or actions. And these are the kinds of things we want to hear from you about. So the first goal really focuses on creating 20-minute neighborhoods. Now, these are neighborhoods that are places where residents have easy and convenient access to many of the places and services they use on a daily basis. These are things like grocery stores, restaurants, schools, and parks. And the idea is that we don't have to rely on a car for all of the trips to these types of kind of focus areas or these mixed-use places. They generally have higher concentrations of people and they have complete sidewalks and bikeways and transit to really support a variety of transportation options. And you can see here in some of the policy ideas, we've talked about improving bike and transit travel, things about improving healthy food access, ensuring that there are community services and facilities throughout, including things like childcare and pre-K. Now, what would that actually look like in South San Francisco? And this is really just a simple diagram to illustrate how that might lay out. Those little red pins or markers that are on the map, these represent the locations of potential sort of mixed use activity areas. And then around them, you see those circles. Those are about a 1 mile walking or 1 mile distance. So it's about a 20-minute walking radius. So there are areas like downtown, the Westboro Shopping Center, which are already community activity centers right now. And then there are new community activity centers on this. So things like an area in the east of 101 area near the Caltrain station, for example. That would be kind of a new activity center. And within each of these areas, we might consider the specific needs of each of those neighborhoods to make sure that there's the right mix of uses, and we look at the right mobility improvements within each of those individual areas. The next goal really focuses on transit-oriented communities. Now, this is kind of one of those new old ideas. We used to talk a lot about transit-oriented development, and that's probably a term many of you have heard before. And transit-oriented development really focuses on placing jobs and housing near high quality, high frequency transit. So things like the South San Francisco BART station, or the Caltrain station, or even along stops potentially in downtown on Grand or along the El Camino corridor. Transit-oriented communities really kind of expands that concept out a little bit, and it really starts to consider the implementation of things like affordable housing, new open spaces, along with just putting jobs and housing near transit. It really also focuses on mobility improvements and increasing accessibility to those key transit stations. And one of the things that emerging practices in kind of these transit-oriented communities are mobility hubs. And mobility hubs are really places of connectivity where you have different travel options all kind of coming together. So walking, biking, transit, and then shared mobility. So things like scooters or Uber and Lyft, like those types of shared mobility services. They all really come together in a kind of close proximity to the transit to better connect that high quality transit to origins or destinations of trips on the other side. So your home or your job or your service that you're going to. And so a mobility hub can really span that first and last mile. It can make it easier for all of us to use transit in the future. Next, one of the goals that we heard a lot about during the previous kind of land use alternatives process was about ensuring a diverse range of housing options for all people, incomes, and family types. Now, key to this is the promotion of a variety of different housing types developed at a range of different densities to equitably serve all members of the community. And this will really be implemented through the land use map that I kind of talked about before, that preferred land use map, as well as very specific programs in the city's housing elements. And another important idea is to really actively facilitate adding affordable and workforce housing in all South San Francisco neighborhoods. This is an idea that was discussed extensively during that planning process, but really helps us to meet these new state requirements around something called affirmatively furthering fair housing and making sure that housing is specifically affordable housing is in all neighborhoods of the city, including high opportunity neighborhoods. And so things like supporting housing on existing church and educational sites is one kind of approach to doing this. And this slide just illustrates a few of those different housing types. So just to get you to think about what housing looks like, these include everything from single family homes to accessory dwelling units in the backyard of single family homes to multifamily housing into even potentially high-rise housing in areas like the East 101. The next goal really focuses on creating a diverse supply of affordable housing options. So this includes continued implementation of city programs like the inclusionary housing ordinance and the application of the state density bonus. It may also include exploring new ideas like overlay zones, whether they're for affordable housing or transit-oriented communities. And it may also include expanded use of things like shared equity homeownership models like community land trusts. And for those who are less familiar, Community Land Trust is a kind of a nonprofit organization that acquires land for the permanent benefit of lower income communities. And you see examples of this type of model popping up all over the place, including across the bay in Oakland. And as I mentioned, one of these emerging practices is the use of overlay zones. And so housing overlay zones are really layers on top of existing zoning ordinances that provide additional incentives for developers to build housing, particularly affordable housing within specific areas of the city. Now, overlay zones can include a variety of incentives for developers, including objective design standards, quicker development review for affordable housing, or more height and density. And examples of these kind of recently adopted overlays can be found in places like Cambridge, Massachusetts, or across the bay in Berkeley, where they're looking at a affordable housing overlay for particular areas of the city. Next, we want to ensure that residents have the opportunity to live in safe and healthy housing. Specific actions include supporting community programs like improving access to retrofit programs like the Earthquake Brace and Bolt program, and maintaining inventories of soft story buildings. That's on the kind of the hazard and seismic side. But it also includes the continual update of building codes to support energy efficiency and healthy buildings, and to create amenities in new building spaces, amongst others. In addition to those goals around housing, the next goal really focuses on kind of creating a diverse economy that supports neighborhood commercial businesses. Now, many of these businesses will be located within those mixed use activity centers that are the heart of those 20-minute walkable neighborhoods. So you can start to see the overlay of these 20-minute neighborhoods, the transit-oriented communities with the housing and with the commercial businesses. And some of the specific programs under this goal are really to help maintain the upkeep of older commercial buildings, and then in some areas to support the reuse of older shopping centers, and allowing some flexibility for startup and affordable business spaces. And one of the key themes from our land use discussions last summer was that folks really wanted South San Francisco to remain a world-class life sciences destination and economic engine for the region. This goal really focuses on that continued support of R&D, life sciences, and high-tech opportunities within the city. And then the last goal, we heard a lot about maintaining industrial in Lindenville and the east of 101 areas, really to help preserve the industrial city heritage, to retain a base of higher paying jobs that match the skill sets of a lot of the residents within the city. And so this goal really focuses on those opportunities for industrial and manufacturing and warehousing within the city. And so these land use policies would really establish some flexible standards for industrial uses to make building improvements easier, and so that they're able to change with market conditions, to limit the introduction of new commercial and non-residential uses into certain areas of Lindenville and east of 101 to kind of preserve that core of jobs, and then really to continue to consider programs like the preservation of production, distribution, and repair businesses. And one example of that is in San Francisco, where the city implemented their 5-point plan about 10 years ago, actually, to really grow and to preserve certain production, distribution, and repair businesses within the city. So the city wanted to ensure that those businesses would have room to kind of grow and then to continue goods manufacturing jobs and really to distribute goods made locally. And they implemented this as part of the way to really reduce the pressure on these areas to redevelop, right? Because there are other uses who could pay more for the land. And so it was a way for the city to kind of maintain certain businesses in certain areas within the city. And finally, you'll find in other goals in the policy framework that is on the Shape SSF website. And these include policies and actions around attractive pedestrian-oriented streets, high-quality architecture and site design, and collaboration with private developers. Now, just for simplicity's sake, we've kind of taken those out of the conversation tonight so we can kind of focus on the other ones, but they're online as part of the survey tool that Dave talked about earlier, and you can go and provide your comments on those as well. And then I'll do one last quick recap before I hand it over to Megan to talk about the Mentimeter. This is just a recap, and we'll put this slide back up. But you know, these are the goals that we just walked through. So at a high level, those 20-minute neighborhoods, transit-oriented communities, with those 3 goals around housing. So a range of housing types, affordable housing, and then opportunities for safe and healthy housing. And then these 3 goals across neighborhood commercial, life sciences, and high-tech jobs, as well as industrial jobs. So it's kind of a summary of what we just went through, and we'll throw that back up on the screen during our small group discussions as well. And with that, we'd like you to head back over to the Menti. We have a few additional questions that Megan will walk through with you.
Yep. Thank you, Eric. Share my window. We have 3 more questions, and they're about some of these ideas that Eric just presented related to land use. Again, the code here is mentimeter.com, and then the code is at the top of the screen, 7985-6931. First one, we're just asking a perspective on some of the ideas that Eric presented, and it's a scale function. Indicate whether you agree or disagree. So it looks like people have gotten ahead of me. It seems like most people agreed about access from all neighborhoods to a diverse mix of uses. That gets at the 20-minute neighborhood idea, walkability. Next, childcare and pre-K facilities should be expanded, right? Most people agree with that. And health food options should be expanded. Okay. A few more here. People also got ahead of me here. So it seems like on this page, the strongest agreement is centered around affordable housing being allowed in all neighborhoods equitably. We did see in the chat comments some people talking about affordable housing as well. This is something that we've heard a lot throughout this engagement process. More housing should be allowed near transit. Housing should be created for seniors. Okay, there's also have a lot of agreement. Housing for multi-generational families, it's coming on pretty strong as well. A little bit less agreement around housing being allowed on school or church sites. And this is the last page here. We asked about whether you agree or disagree or how strongly about some of these commercial and industrial related uses. So most people agree that it is important to maintain industrial jobs at 3.8. Okay, now it's going down a little bit. We're about in the middle, I would say, for having an industrial preservation program, and as well as growing life sciences and technology businesses. So again, if you don't get to this right now, that's okay. You can come back later and continue sharing your thoughts in these Mentimeter polling questions. So thank you to those who participated. And now I will turn things over to Dave again, I believe.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you all again for participating in the discussion. Great to see you all navigating the Mentimeter. Always fun to have something a little more interactive. We are about to transition now to the breakout rooms. It's great to see that we have a large number of folks that have joined us here tonight, which will allow us to break up into 3 smaller groups and continue the conversation. So you'll have a facilitated discussion in each one of those groups. If there's time, we can start with introductions and then a facilitated discussion around some of these key topics that Eric and team just presented. And then the hope is we'll come back together and do a report back at the end so we can hear what the discussion was in each one of the groups and then talk a little bit more about next steps and where we go from here. I do want to note that there was some chat that also came through, a lot of input about housing in general and housing affordability and housing for young people that are getting priced out of the market. Some conversation around community gardens and healthy foods. So great ideas. Thank you for sharing. I want you to take all that great ideas with you into the small groups and continue the conversations there. So we appreciate you sharing those. And before we actually move to the small breakout groups, we do have the live interpretation happening in Spanish. And I wanted to ask Jasmine to ask folks that might be on that channel or those that are with us here, if you would like to be in a small group that's facilitated primarily in Spanish, if you could please use the hand raise function. And you could let me know through the hand raise function now. And if you go to reactions, you can get to the hand raise there, or you might simply have hand raise available in the participant window, depending on what format you're using. So I'm just gonna give a couple seconds here to see if we have any hands raised, and it doesn't look like we do. So with that, I am going to split up folks as evenly as possible into the small groups here. And I will open this up in just 1 second. So maybe take a 10-second breather here while I split these groups up. And then once I open up the rooms, you will see an opportunity to navigate directly to the room. I actually might open it up just so we can kind of launch right into them. I'm going to have the setting actually put you directly into one of the rooms. And then you can go ahead and start the conversation. So with that, the rooms are going to open now. Have a great time. I'll see you back here after the discussion.